Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Transpicuous Views. It is June 18th, and it's apparently blistering hot fucking everywhere. So we're going to do something a little different tonight. We're going to kind of, well, I don't know how different it'll be. We'll probably end up in the same topics of conversation anyway. But we're going to start off anyway. We're going to talk money, finance, those dirty words, and talk about the control structures. Now, okay, so we got with us tonight, we've got our very own John Karl Anderson over there in this corner. And down below, we've got Karl from Canada. And down right below me, although you guys might be seeing it differently, we have David Hodgeson. So, JC and Karl have got their own show every Sunday, and it is dealing with a lot of this kind of stuff, but from the grassroots understanding level of like how the fuck we got here, how did this whole mess kind of get here, and how to look at working around it. We'll get into that in a second. Today we're going to talk on this level, but we're going to take it a little deeper, and we're going to look at some of the shit that we're watching play out right now. Things like cryptocurrencies, e-currencies, the whole Bitcoin conundrum shit, and perhaps some of the papal bulls and the ISO stuff. And I'll kind of maybe pull at a couple of strings and see if we can't pull together some thoughts and theories on what the fuck is actually going on. So, hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Happy with us. So first off, before we start, John, I want you to introduce your new show. Like, let people know your new show.
Okay, the new show is called Essentium Mentium, which is Latin for a meeting of the minds. And essentially, we're looking at the deception of law, the words they use, how they trick you into different things, and the level of personal responsibility you require in order to step out of that system. Because you can't, if you're not prepared to take on 100% liability, you can't step out of that system. So you really have to think about how you're interacting with your neighbors, how you're interacting with your community, and be responsible. That's the core of this whole thing. That's essentially it. We cover a number of different topics. We've talked about the elements of jurisdiction, the deception of court, the assumptions of court. We've talked about licensing, registration. Today, we kind of just went off on a number of different tangents. And that archive will be up shortly. It's rendered. I just have to have some time to actually install it. But if you're looking for the archive, you can find it on RTS Earth. Same place as the Unfuck It and Transpicuous Views archives. There'll be another link for Essentium Mentium, and you can go there and watch our past shows, have a look. We're looking for people to come in. We do it on Discord. It's just a voice chat, and we want people to come in. We welcome debate, because we don't have all the answers. And the more we explain, the more we go through this, the better we understand it. So come on in, join the show Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. on Pacific time. There's on the Essentium Mentium page on RTS Earth, there's a time converter. You click it, it'll tell you what time it is in your area. And please come on in, have a chat, ask questions, we're looking for content. We're looking for people. It's a meeting of the minds. So, you know, don't just listen to us. We want to hear you too.
Well, this is the thing. It seems that the more you look at these topics, the more intertwined you realize it all is. And it's like in the legal structures, you find the control structures that link in all these dirty little pieces. And there's so many pieces to the legal structure that are completely hidden, completely buried under words that the average person has no concept of what their actual meanings are, under bureaucracy of, you know, under what standing are you standing? Are you in a federal court, a state court, a municipal court? Are you under admiralty law, canon law, UCC law? You fucking name one. And all of these things tie back. They all really tightly tie back into a lot of the financial stuff. And is this something that is really, really interesting? Because all of a sudden we're seeing a shift. We're seeing a shift. So I know Karl and JC, and I'm not sure about you, David. I assume you were there too, you know, back in the good old RV days, you know, and all this shit, right? We were all in deep into the intel and ripping things apart. So what I'm seeing now, compared to the intel that we were all looking at, you know, 4, 5, and 6 years ago, is there's been kind of a shift into different areas, i.e. the big one being electronic currencies and these cryptocurrencies and blockchain. So I want to talk about that first. What I would like is, could one of you gentlemen give the viewers a relatively simple explanation of cryptocurrencies and blockchain? Even just the basics, because I'm really, really bad. I still cannot understand blockchain myself. It's like, it's a who what? So anyone want to jump in? Just a brief understanding.
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase something that somebody else said in another link that David actually posted in the UU group on Facebook. I'm not sure whether it's probably a bit too condensed, but what was mentioned or what was said is that blockchain is, in essence, is a spreadsheet of transactions. Each and every transaction that occurs is recorded on this spreadsheet, and then it's sent out to everybody, all separate locations, all separate computers that are part of that system. The fact that it's open source, everybody can see that spreadsheet and access it, means that nobody can make any changes on it without somebody else seeing what's going on, supposedly.
That's interesting.
That's a very, very condensed and summarized version of how somebody else explained blockchain and crypto type currencies. Now, just to expand on it a little bit, there are nodes that hold a lot of this information and the transactions. And these particular computer systems, they are all over the world, in different places in the world. However, if these things are condensed into, say, banking systems or intelligence agencies, they can monitor and see what's going on and maybe even change what's going on, which is why I said before that we're not supposed to be able to access this stuff and make changes. We really don't know. I don't anyway. But I think if intelligence agencies can get into these nodes, potentially they might be able to make changes to what's going on and influence what's going on, which is why I think Bitcoin, most recently, just shot up to $3,000. Why the hell did that happen?
Yeah. Well, and we'll get into that whole Bitcoin thing in a second. But I want to talk about the blockchain for a second, because the one thing we saw, and it didn't get a lot of fanfare, you kind of had to be knowing where to look, is in late 2014 or late 2015, we saw a rush of countries putting out, help wanted ads specifically pertaining to blockchain. So when all of a sudden you have central banks and literally governments hiring professionals, we've got a really bad feedback, I don't know what it is, hiring professionals to deal specifically, whoa, is there a bird in the house somewhere? There is. Dealing specifically with blockchain. I immediately then was like, oh, guys, pay attention. France, Spain, frickin', there was one of the Middle East countries, etc., all within 3 weeks of each other, all announced quietly to the side, if you knew where to look, that they were hiring blockchain experts, and not just like low level, but way up there. Which is always a thing when you're dealing with something. The question I always have as a completely non-techie person is, why open source? Because if it's open source, it seems to me that there could also be a way, if it's open source, that you could have things get meddled with. John, can you do a mute all?
I'm looking at the camera, or looking at the mics. The only mics that are open are ours, so it's got to be one of us. And unless you just turned your volume up recently.
Yeah. No, in fact, I turned it down a little bit, and I've got my headphones on.
Okay.
Who's Karl? So I don't know.
Yeah, I've got headphones in too, so.
We can try me and my headphones again, but we don't know how bad that's going to go. Right? We did a test right before we went live. So this is the thing. When you're looking at the blockchain, and now all of a sudden we have the announcements coming out that all governments are going to be instituting their own electronic currency, their own digital currencies. What's going on? And the question that comes to mind is this a new plan? Or is this the original plan that was there all along? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't tell me that, just Bitcoin just appeared out of nowhere and took them all by surprise, and they all decided to jump on the bandwagon, especially when we know nothing about Bitcoin, who invented it, et cetera, et cetera. So, with the question of what are they doing with these new electronic currencies, brings me back to the point about the whole RV and the global revaluation of currency and the finicking around with all that shit that we've watched for years. Is the idea of an electronic currency the way they're going to try and push forward with this? Or is this the excuse of how they get around it? So what do you guys think? What's your gut feeling on some of this shit going on with this, specifically these digital currencies and the new government?
Danny, one of the things that come to mind, am I too loud?
No, hon.
Okay. One of the things that come to my mind is the fact that if everything goes digital, right? We've got all of our digital movies, digital, phones, data, etc. So if the currencies all go digital and they're trying to implement this thing that goes under the skin to your financial
RFID.
Yeah. So it just kind of fits in there too,
Well, I mean, and that on the surface is always what I've said. I've always warned everyone, like digital currencies, if everything goes digital, it's just numbers on a screen. I mean, it's numbers on a screen now, we all know this, but it's numbers on a screen that can be pulled back, taken away. It's not like you can have physical cash in your hand if everything's just numbers on a screen. So
makes it easier to do a reset too, doesn't it?
Well, does it? That therein is the question.
Okay.
They can do that now, to be honest. If they wanted to do a reset, they have the capability of doing it now, because most of the currency in existence in any country in the world is in electronic form. There's only a maximum 3% that's in physical notes and coins.
Yeah.
So, the people on the street, typically, if they're using cash, there's only a maximum 3% anyway in the actual economy. Everything else is digital. And what they're trying to do is force you into using these electronic means of payment, because at one point or very soon they're going to want to remove cash completely, and they are trying it. Sweden is supposedly implementing it. India has just gone down that route. Australia, they're talking about it, I believe. And there are other countries that are also talking about removing cash from the system and going completely electronic. Now, there may be good reasons for doing that and bad reasons for doing that. Me personally, it removes your freedom, because right now we have the capability of interacting and doing commerce under the table, is what they like to, or the black market as they like to refer to it, the underground market, because we can do cash to cash or barter. We could potentially still do that with electronic currency, but it's going to mean that they have full control of you, full control of your spending, and full control on what you receive, and also the ability to remit all taxes. So they get 100% tax received, because they have full control and accounting of all electronic transactions, all money.
But not just that, I mean, also where you are. When you do transactions, where were you? Were you traveling here? Were you there? Were you at the corner store? They can basically, I mean, they do it already. We know they do this already to the chips that are on debit cards and Visa cards, and hell, in your passport and everything else. They can track where you're traveling. They can track out your patterns. They can set up an algorithm. Okay, well, they go here every Friday. The guy goes to this store and buys a 6-pack of beer and a carton of smokes, and et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sorry.
They can do that with our cell phones now, though. Just everybody has a cell phone, so they already have the mapping capabilities built directly into it to both Google and Apple.
Yep.
Yeah,
What do you think, David?
I don't think they can quite make that jump. And this is one of the reasons why I've been going down the whole ISO track. Now, for people that don't know what the ISO is, that's the International Standards Organization. And basically, they set the standards internationally and globally. And so, in some ways, everything. And in some ways, that's really great. Like, for instance, if you want to get a 12-millimeter bolt with a coarse thread, you can get the same bolt in the United States, in England, in Afghanistan, if you can find a 12-millimeter bolt with a coarse thread, in Australia. And it goes into basically, they set the standards for everything. So anything that is invented or created that is going on an international level, i.e. outside of one country, has to meet the ISO standards. That's my basic nutshell understanding of that.
Yeah, in theory, that's it. That's the way it's supposed to work. But I'm a tool and die maker by trade. I deal with those standards on a regular basis, or I used to. Mm-hmm. And if you were to take Bosch spark plugs and put them in a Japanese engine, over time you will destroy that engine, because the threads aren't the same. I've also, one of the companies that I worked with, I was the ISO officer of the company. We dealt with ISO 9002 system. And it was my job to go through and audit everything. And I found out that the ISO 9002 system, basically, we write our own rules. And the only thing the ISO does is make sure that we follow our own rules. So it's, I mean, the ISO system is good. It needs to be there. A meter is a meter is a meter. A pound is a pound. A kilogram is a kilogram. But there's still a lot of wiggle room within that system so that each individual organization, be it a country or a business, can essentially write their own rules. And as long as they follow their own rules, they're not violating anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my understanding was that the ISO would, like for the bolt example, they would set, okay, here are the measurements, you know, and the angles that this needs to be. Here are, if you're creating a certain tensile strength, you know, here's what it needs to be. Exactly. But they're not going to dictate what kind of metals or the you know, metallurgical techniques that they're
the difference
putting
between
into
dollar
those
store bolts and good quality bolts from the machine shop.
Bingo. They'll both work, but what do you really want to use?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is it. So they do everything from infant car seats have to meet ISO standards, to car parts have to meet ISO standards, to housing parts when you're in construction. You know, that's what Nick did for years. They have to meet ISO standards. But the ISO goes deeper than that.
Yes.
Because people think of it in those terms of product terms, i.e. something you go out and buy, like a car seat, like a car, like a house. What they don't realize is that the ISO also dictates, let's say, maybe I shouldn't say dictates. They organize, for lack of a better word, they organize things like the country codes.
Yes.
The currency codes. Now, all under the idea, of course, that it has to be standardized. In international banking, you can understand that. You say, okay, right, you know, Canada CDN for Canadian, or CDN, right? Have I got that right? Isn't that terrible? I can't even remember my own country code.
Yeah, in the country codes, there's basically three codes. There's a 2-letter code.
Yep.
There's a 3-letter code, and then there's a number code.
Exactly. So go into that. Because that is part of this that you and I have been looking at.
Yes.
So the 2-letter code is the 2 letters for the country, right?
Yes.
So like Japan is JP, I believe, or JN. I can't remember. And then you have a 3-letter code, which is the JPY. And the Y stands for yen, as in currency. And then they're assigned a number as well, a 3-digit number. And it all gets real interesting when all of a sudden they start changing codes.
Yeah. So here, we'll come back to that because there's a real interesting little tidbit that I found in doing some of this research. Now, yesterday I was going down this track with, you know, the blockchain and all like that, and one of the news pieces that came up was that was at Nevada. It's basically, as far as the blockchain, it doesn't have to do anything with the cryptocurrency. It has to do with the blockchain. It's basically become a free trade zone.
I didn't catch that. I automatically assumed it was cryptocurrencies. I didn't realize it was the blockchain.
Exactly. And I did a little more checking, and they're not in place yet, but they're currently coming up with the ISO standards. And I'll give you the phrasing exactly. It's blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. The ISO code, if you want to go and look this up, is ISO /TC Tango Charlie 307. And this is being put together by the standards organization in Australia.
What?
Yes.
All right. Back up.
Okay.
new law in Nevada making blockchain basically a free trade zone.
Yes.
Using an ISO code, which an ISO runs out of Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
But this is being done out of Australia?
Well, Australia is where they're setting up the standards. So they would set up the standards, and then, as long as everything is copacetic in those standards that have been developed, those would get integrated into the ISO. There might be a couple tweaks for the ISO standards, but that's kind of the bottom line. And I've got a copy of I found a copy of the roadmap that they're putting together.
Okay, so when did Australia become the area or the place or the whatever office, if you will, that's setting the standards?
Well, I don't know when exactly they start. I'm trying to find some information for you.
Well, the reason I'm asking is when I went down the ISO frickin' rabbit hole back in June of 2015, there was no mention of Australia. I never came across anything to do with ISO in Australia other than what you automatically assume would be in Australia.
Right. Well, it sounds like they're using Australia as a test bed rather than the head office.
Right. These guys are hammering out the details and how this is going to work. It looks like the established roadmap steering group started in November 2016. Open blockchain survey started in December 2016. Host blockchain standards workshop started in February 2017. And release roadmap report came out in March 2017.
Interesting. I mean, they're rolling out a lot of stuff in Australia. That was the thing when I was there that was really, really shocking. The shit that they're rolling out in Australia. So, from mandatory vaccines to getting rid of all internet and going solely with all landline shit and going solely with the towers, with Wi-Fi, with the Gwen Tower, et cetera. So they're rolling out a lot of interesting bits and pieces there.
Yeah.
So maybe
I'm wondering if that is part and parcel with the historic origins of Australia, being a prison colony, being a control system right from day one. I think we were discussing this before, Danny, about if you look at areas, areas that have historically been a feudal zone, they're still feudal zones. Areas that have historically been the freedom fighters, they're still freedom fighters. I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, being that Australia historically has been a controlled environment where when they wave the club, everybody ducks and just gets out of the way. I mean, they're not as militant in Australia as they are in Arkansas, right? Yeah. If you try to put the controls they have in Australia in a place like the Midwest or Arkansas, people will get shot. They will shoot you.
I wish we had Ben here. I'm just sitting here. I'm looking through. Is Ben here? Please tell me Ben's online. It's too early in the morning for him, I think, because it's only.
I don't see him.
It's 6 o'clock in the morning in his time zone right now over in Australia. Because this is the thing. I mean, this is what Ben has been digging into, is all the fucking treaties and the shit with Australia. There's a lot of really strange shit. Australia and New Zealand. There's a lot of really, really strange shit you come across when you start cross-referencing dates and treaties and who signed what, when, and how. So there's always a big question there. Now, okay, now I won't digress into that because that's another whole fucking conversation that I bet I'm not even going to go into. We'll just bypass the whole Australia thing because that's another whole rabbit hole.
Danny, can I ask you just to reach over and just turn your on the speakers themselves, just turn them down just a smidge? Not so it's hard to hear, but I think that's where that squeak is coming from.
Okay, is that better? Okay, we'll see. Maybe I better put my headset back in after all. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not so bad, but it's in. I think the squeak is gone now. So
I have a headset. Let's get.
I mean, my opinion about the whole thing is that we globally, and I use like finances as an indicator of that finance doesn't know any borders. You can do business in different countries, but finance really doesn't know any borders whatsoever. No passports, no nothing. You know, I think we've gotten to the point where we've chosen, and also the proverbial day is moving us into a digital world.
Yeah.
It looks like that's just going to happen, and we're past the point of no return with that. The question in my mind is this a re-phoenix of the old system, or is this a realignment so that humanity can start moving forward out of these control structures? The structures are still going to be there, whether we're in a re-phoenix system or whether we're moving forward, because let's face it, most people were born into this. It's all they know. And so they have to create, if we're moving forward, they have to create new structures, new construct, however you want to phrase that, so that people can learn how to live in a world where things work the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting.
Or it's slavery 2.0.
Or it's slavery 2.0. Okay, so here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Karl, what you said about blockchain. So if it is, I mean, and I've read this too, the whole thing about using Bitcoin as an example, which works on blockchain, is that it's all out there in the public. Like everyone sees what everyone owns. It's supposed to be untamperable, the whole bit. Do we believe that? No, I do not. But
Nope.
if, and let's just pretend, we'll play along with their game and say, okay, we believe you. It's open source. Everyone can see everything that's going on, all these transactions. Then on the one hand, you'd sit there and go, oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Because if everyone can see, i.e. if Russia could see what the U.S. is doing, look at it from central bank point perspective, government perspectives, right? If Russia can see what the U.S. is doing and China can see what India is doing and everyone knows, then you could look at it as being a step forward in the fact of there's going to be a lot less shenanigans, so to speak, that could happen if everyone's watching. Of course, that's also playing on this, we're surmising that they're all on separate teams, which we know they're not. They're all on the same team. But whatever. Play along with me here. The biggest problem with money transactions, so we're talking banking, international banking, is of course SWIFT, is the means in which money transfers happen for the most part now. And the SWIFT money transfers been proven to be hackable. And I followed a whole lot of shit back in 2013 where large sizable sums of money started going missing out of SWIFT. And they somehow ended up, instead of going to Deutsche Bank, they ended up in Hong Kong, in HSBC. Oh, and who owns SWIFT? HSBC owns it lock, stock, and barrel. This is not people don't realize that it is actually owned by HSBC. So you could look at it as a positive. If it is actually what they say it is, it's unhackable, it's open source, everyone should be able to see everything and know what all these transactions are that are happening, we could look at it this way. But of course, us being, the eternal pessimists that I know we all are, we don't actually believe it. So you go right back to the same question. That whole slavery 2.0. Is this a re-phoenixing of the system? One of the things I've talked about is a lot of the information that I got in 2013, especially about the fact of the last re-phoenixing happened in between 1998 and 1999. And the re-phoenixing or the remirroring, as they call it, of the system, they knew when it was remirrored then that it would not last. And it would only last, they might be able to stretch it 10, maybe 15 years tops before the whole thing would come crashing down. And they knew they would never be able to remirror it again. Because basically when they remirror the financial system, it's like taking a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. And sooner or later, you get to the point where the final photocopy is illegible. It's unreadable. There's nothing there anymore. And this is the point where they're at. They knew that an entirely new system would have to be put into place. So in 2008, almost exactly 10 years after the rephoenixing of the system, we had the Lehman's crash. We have all this stuff happen where they pulled a lot of fast and furious quick ones, and they passed money out everywhere, and all kinds of magical things happen in the financial markets that just made money randomly appear and somehow get printed, purportedly, all over the place. And since then, we have watched one circus event after another circus event where they have been coming up with some of the most ridiculous things ever seen. And magically, using the US as an example, magically pulling hats out of rabbits and coming up with money that just appears, which is, of course, like, fiat currency is empty. We all know that. But, I mean, they're not supposed to be able to just magically create $220 billion, which is what they did in early December 2015, twice. So, going back to this, is this the new rephoenixing of the system? I.e., they need to put a new financial system in place? And it has to be new, like completely new, because they can't rephoenix what's already there. So is that it? Is that what we're seeing with this push now towards blockchain and electronic currencies? Is this how they're going to create a brand new whole system?
I think you have to look at values as well, because let's face it, 100 years ago, how many loaves of bread could you buy for, 2 pennies? Now, $4 for a loaf of bread. So not only do they have to look at a completely new financial system, I think we have to look at the values that are associated with that system as well. Otherwise, we're going to get used to having to pay $500,000 to buy a goddamn house. And we only make $30,000 a year. How are you going to do it?
It's not possible.
No, it's not. And that's part of the problem that we're facing right now. They've inflated everything, because I've done so much research on the money system. I understand what it is that they're doing and have been doing. And it's reached maximum entropy now. What they're doing is that they're just doing the shell game. They're moving money from one place to pay what's due on another location. And then, okay, we've got some more due over here, so we'll move it over there. They're just moving money around and then also bringing new money in.
And passing laws to make it legal. And passing laws to make it completely fucking legal.
Yeah.
It floored me when I was looking at the new Basel 3, it's actually Basel 4, gold laws and the asset laws. And yet in the clauses, it's like banks could trade their gold stashes around to support their assets. But basically, it's like you could take it from Deutsche Bank, could lend it over to the Bank of England so that they could balance their books and make it look like they have all this gold. But the next day is, it's got to be, the Bank of France. Okay, we're going to move some gold down here so they can prop up their books. And it's perfectly legal.
Yeah. Making a credit card payment with your credit card.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And in what realm of reality can this actually have any meaning? And can there actually have a value? Can this fake currency money actually have a value when it's so valueless that they can play these games with it?
Well, the other concern I have as well, Danny, is that what they're doing with the value of money, and I've lost my train of thought for a second there.
Karl,
sorry, just carry on until I get it back.
Okay, so, and then I got to run away for a second because my feet are getting eaten alive by the mosquitoes, and I forgot to spray my feet. So I'm going to go run away for 2 seconds and go get my mosquito spray.
Okay.
So this rephoenixing, And so you got the two sides, right? You have the side of this whole global currency revaluation, a new financial system, et cetera, which on the surface looks a hell of a lot like a savior meme. And yet we know that it has to happen. Like, i.e., the financial system's done. It is completely and utterly fucking empty. It's done. There's nothing left. There's no way of pulling themselves out of the hole of the derivatives alone. Like, never mind the country's debts, the derivatives market, it's not possible. Like, there is not that much value if you combined every fucking bank account on the entire fucking planet. You can't come up with the value that is now represented by the derivatives. So,
yeah, they're talking about $500 quadrillion US dollars is the value of the derivatives market, whereas the GDP of every country in the world is only in the trillions.
Yeah.
There just isn't enough money in the system to ever repay what is owed on all of these bets, which is what, all these are.
So this is why I always, I wander off and I come back and I said, a new currency, let's refine that. A new financial system has to be put into play. And I'm not talking for our benefit. I'm not saying, just for us, I guess, and the good guys are going to give us a new financial system. I'm saying it has to fucking happen because there's nothing left. They can't play this game forever. You just can't, because the bookkeeping gets to the point of, they're going to have to start making 25-foot long, computer screens just to be able to hold the derivatives market and the number of zeros that it has behind it, right? So, new financial reset. The question is, of course, obviously, is it going to be to our benefit? All those who actually believe that, raise your hands. Yeah.
Well, any centralized fiat system is going to crash. It's going to fall apart. It has to. There's no way that system can sustain for any length of time. Yeah. Historically, the only type of, I'm going to use the word financial very, very loosely here. The only financial system that can sustain itself is a decentralized resource-based system where each community generates whatever they generate, and that is shared with the communities in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And that little spider web spiders out and so on and so on. That's the only one that can sustain itself because that's the only one that can grow. And it's a natural growth. When you grow a plant, you're gaining value from the effort you put into growing that plant. At the end of its growth cycle, you've got a product now that you can distribute.
Yeah.
And it doesn't ever go away. With a fiat system, you print a dollar bill, you lend it to somebody at 10% interest, but you demand fiat back to pay the interest. They have to borrow more money to pay the interest.
Yeah.
And it cannot sustain itself. That's not possible.
Well, the fiat system itself is or can be sustainable.
I'll be right back.
To an extent. The problem is that it's interest. The money itself isn't the issue. Debt itself is not the issue. It's interest that's attached to it, because every single dollar that is ever created is created with a demand for interest. So, for argument's sake, you want a $100,000 loan, they demand another $5,000 in interest, but $100,000 was only ever created. Now, I actually used an analogy that I helped to explain, because people just didn't understand this concept. They just said, well, if somebody lends you money, then it's your right to ask for interest. No, it's against the religion for a start. But the main thing that I used to use was, two people on an island, a banker and you. Or you can be the banker and there's another person. They want to hypothetically borrow $100,000 because they want to build a house. Okay, let's just play hypotheticals. You go to that banker and he says, sure, I'll give you $100,000, but I want $5,000 back in interest. And you say, fine, sure, I'll do that. First thing, where does he get the $100,000 from? Because there's only you and him on there. Where's the money? So where does that come from? That's part of the whole banking system itself. Secondly, where are you going to get the extra $5,000 from? He only gave you $100,000. Right. That is the fundamental basics of the whole money system. The reason that it works is because there are millions of us, and we're all going in at varying different times in our lives asking for loans from the bank each time we create that money. And secondly, the demanded interest you take from somebody else during the normal course of your business, whatever it is, whether you do it through, fraud or just business practices or whatever it is, you manage to make back your $5,000. But that means you took $5,000 from somebody else, and through no fault of their own, their business will collapse. That's why bankruptcies happen right now under this current system, because it's designed that way. And the reason that they're trying to extend it right now, from my earlier train of thought, is they're bringing interest rates down to zero, because to increase them just means the system crashes more, because the more interest payments, the bigger the interest payments demanded, the less money there is currently in the system for them to be able to pull that interest, to be able to pay it. So they have to keep the interest rates down. What I find interesting right now is that the Federal Reserve in the US just put up the interest rates twice as soon as Trump got in. And for no apparent reason. There's no reason, because economically speaking, the US is in shit street. And there is no economy that explains why they're putting that interest up. So that to me means that they are trying to force the collapse of the system. My worry is what they're going to introduce in its place. And if they are introducing it, it's not going to be for our benefit. Now, I did some work with Mike Montagna. Go on, John.
I was just going to bring up, if we look at the historical lessons in the U.S. of the 30s, we know the Great Depression in the 30s was not an organic thing. It was generated. In the 20s, the banks dumped a whole bunch of this fiat currency on the market, and everybody was great. Everybody had lots of money in their wallet and everything. And then in the 30s, they just didn't put any money in the market. And all of a sudden, none of these bills that people could pay their debts with, and they managed to steal everybody's property. I mean, it's completely controlled that way. If you look at money as simply a means of accounting, just to keep track of stuff, then fine, it would all work. You could use toenail clippings, you could use hair, you could use rocks with a hole in it. It doesn't matter, because it's just a system of accounting. But the way they've generated it now is that this is the only means that most people see as a system of exchange. So if they don't have a $10 bill in their pocket, they go, oh, I got to go hungry this week. Rather than thinking, go and do something for your neighbor and maybe they'll feed you. I mean, David, you said that this is like it's past the tipping point. It's an inevitability. Mm-hmm. Well, yes and no. We still have the alternative. We still have the alternative to say, I'm not playing with money anymore.
Right.
I'm dealing with my neighbors, period. And go to a private, decentralized support system. Mm-hmm. You may not get Arabica coffee. You may not get kiwi fruit anymore. But you're still going to have a life. You're still going to be able to exist and be healthy and have what you need at the time you need it. Some of the luxury items, specialty things, there's going to be some issues unless you want to be a traveling merchant, and then you go and you deal with it there, barter with it there, bring it back and barter with it here, like they used to do 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, but that gets back to the commitment of the choices that you're making about the lifestyle that you're going to be choosing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
I mean, Karl and I both, we can attest to this. When you walk down this road, yeah, you are giving up stuff.
mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to give it up, you can actually live pretty much outside of the system.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have the latest iPhone, if you want to have the fastest internet, if you want to have the fastest car, you're stuck in the system because the people that provide those things only deal in that system right now.
Yeah.
If consumer pressure forces them to accept other means of exchange, then we can move away from money into other forms of exchange. And it's a matter of the collective will whether or not we can do this. I mean, if Apple all of a sudden doesn't sell any iPhones, their price is going to drop. If everybody that walks into an Apple store says, look, I'm not paying you money, but I have a big bucket of apples, will this suffice? Probably in the beginning, no. But if it goes on long enough and Apple is hurting, they're going to take anything. They'll take a chicken.
Yep.
Just because they got to eat too, right?
Yeah.
We can force this if we have sufficient numbers and sufficient will to do it.
Mm-hmm. I know for myself.
To be honest, John, I'd like to go back to the Bills of Exchange Act, how it was, intended and implemented, because that system is already in place.
And it's a very good system. I mean, if the Bills of Exchange Act, if the original design of this financial system was returned to, it would be awesome. It would work very well. There would be no hunger. There would be no homelessness. It would work.
Definition, guys, quick definition of Bills of Exchange Act. Can you give us just a quick summation? What do you mean by that? Just because some people are not going to get it. What does that mean?
It's not a simple thing. A bill of exchange is a negotiable instrument. Okay, something that you can take and somebody else will go, yes, okay, I accept this as value. It could be promissory notes. Okay, that is a promissory note.
Yeah.
It has no intrinsic value. It is a promise to pay, nothing more. When you go to the bank and do a mortgage, a PLC, a car loan, you're writing up a promissory note. You're creating money. But the banks don't let you know this. And I know you were involved in this when the OPPT stuff was going around and it got really big. The last thing I heard was the group going to the bank in the States, talking to I think it was the assistant bank manager, showing them their bonds and all their paperwork and everything. And the bank manager said, we're not prepared to do this yet. Not that it couldn't be done, but they weren't ready to do it yet.
Right.
Now,
David?
we can force that. If we have the collective will and the numbers to do it, we can force that to happen.
Well, the reason they won't do it is because the current system, as it's running, makes them billions of dollars every single day or month, whatever. It makes them a huge amount of money because we don't use the system the way we're supposed to. And what's happening is there's a massive transfer of wealth and property because they're garnering the system against us. It's reached its maximum now. They've transferred ownership of pretty much everything on the planet. And we're struggling to survive. So if we went back to the Bills of Exchange, yes, it's government legislation right now, but the banks and the governments and businesses, this is not for personal, this is business, this is banking, and it's government related. Anything you get, a bill or a remittance, so hydro, gas, all of these things, there's usually a little strip at the bottom. Well, it's a remittance, so it's a statement and a remittance slip at the bottom. So it's actually two in one. But that bottom piece, if it was a bills of exchange, you would say, yeah, okay, I accept that bill, that statement, what you've sent me, and I'm going to sign it here, and I'm going to confirm its value, and I'm going to send it back to you so that you can go to the bank and get your bill discharged. It's not paid, but it's discharged. So it comes off the total money supply, or national debt, as they now call it. Because we're all in bankruptcy. Every country is in bankruptcy, which is why this particular bill was brought into force. But they never really implemented it for use. Not with us on the street, anyway. The big guys up top know how to use it, and they're writing bills of exchange shit and promissory notes exchange all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
They know how to do it. We don't, because we're not told.
No.
Yeah, to reinforce what Karl was saying about how the bankers are making billions and billions of dollars. I mean, if you look at the money in a country, say Canada, and you look at Royal Bank, and their quarterly profits are $10 billion. Where did this come from? Now the process is it's surprising to most people. They don't realize this is what's going on, but this is precisely what's going on. Every single customer that walks into the bank that does some sort of loan generates the money themselves. Okay, they create a promissory note. They create the funds. Yep. The bank types that number into a computer, hands them a check. They convert the money from money of account to money of exchange so that the people can go and deal with it. The bank then takes that promissory note, bundles it with a bunch of others, sells it, gets paid for the note. They also demand you to pay that note, so you're making your monthly payments constantly, so they're getting paid twice at that point. And then 90% of the time, they foreclose on you and take the property that you bought with your own money that you created, and then they sell that off and get paid a third time.
Yep.
This is where the
don't forget the insurance companies,
and don't forget the insurance companies.
They insure it and then claim the insurance.
That's right.
Not just insure it once. Sometimes insure it 3, 4, 5, 6 times.
Yeah,
and they sell it. Out. Yeah, exactly. And they sell the insurance
3, 4, 5, 6 times.
So yeah, I mean, it's the concept of how they make money now.
And it's all because we are not paying attention.
Well,
that's the only reason they get away with it.
Let me toss this question out. So as I'm understanding you guys talking, because I'm coming from this, not from the expertise and the experience that you guys have. I wasn't part of the RV. I came into this, I finished up some really deep energetic work, and I'd come out and I'm going like, well, where did I land? And all of a sudden I'm in the UCC, arena, going through the learning curve on that. So potentially, if you were to use like a fiat currency system, for a fiat monetary system, could it be used if it didn't include things like interest and all of that, if it was intended to work for everyone as a means of exchange?
Let me answer that one, David.
Okay.
John, let me just answer this one, because Canada was the prime example of how that system worked, because they had a public Bank of Canada that operated to provide funds for the federal government, the provincial government, and to a lesser extent the municipal governments, interest-free. Now, they did this between 1935 and 1974. And actually what happened was in 1933-34, all that shit was going on with the bankruptcy in the US and in the UK, and they tried to do the same in Canada. And I think it was Mackenzie King, correct me if I'm wrong, for Prime Ministers there, Danny, but what they tried to do was bring a central bank into Canada in 1934. And the Prime Minister, I think it was Mackenzie King, said, nah, we're not having any of that shit. We're going to have a public bank. It will be our central bank, and it will do things without interest or very, very small fees, which didn't matter because it went back to the bank. So they would create the money supply for the country, for Canada, and it was actually about $19 billion. That was what it took to run Canada.
For a year.
Probably a good 100 years. Yeah, per year.
That's what they printed.
Every year. Yeah, so it was $19 billion every year, and that it never changed. It went up a little bit, but it was based on infrastructure. So they built the St. Lawrence Seaway infrastructure. They built the transnational Canadian railway system and road system. They built other bridges and road infrastructure. They paid for their Second World War bills, let's say.
Yep.
It funded them through the Second World War. But then it took them through to 1974. Never really changed all that much. It might have gone up a little bit, but then when it wasn't required, the bank just pulled the money from the system, retired it from the system, and it went down to what was needed. Yep. Now, Pierre Trudeau in 1974 got cozy with the international bankers because they wanted to control more of the world at this point.
All you non-Canadians, hold on, all you non-Canadians, that would be Pierre Elliott Trudeau, i.e. Justin Trudeau's daddy. Just to put this into perspective for you guys. Go ahead, Karl.
Okay. So in 1974, he said, no, we're going to move off that system because the central bankers really know how to control money, the usual shit system and shit excuse that we get told. And they said, okay, commercial banking from now on. In 22 years, from 1974 to 1976, it went from $19 billion to $587 billion. That was the national debt, as it was now called, for Canada. Realistically, it's the money supply, but they now call it national debt because it is a debt, because now we're paying private bankers who are charging interest for us to use our own money that the governments have the power to create in the first place. And it's now probably $1.3 trillion. We're at 2017, maybe about 1.3 trillion, I believe. I'm not entirely sure, but it's pretty close.
To answer, to simple answer to the question, David, is yes. If the currency was nothing more than a means of accounting, a way to keep track, nothing more, then it would work just fine. Perfect. But again, you wouldn't need the currency. You could just do it with a ledger. I mean, you wouldn't have to transfer these goofy little pieces of plastic around. Again,
bills of exchange. Yeah,
that's right. And the bills of exchange. As an example, what happened in Canada in the 30s, basically when all of this really started, Canada sucked up all of the resources. The government of Canada sucked up all of the resources and value of the country and put it in what's called a collateral account. And in order to do that, they had to give some sort of a receipt to each and every person whose birthright it was to have a portion of that value. And that's what the birth certificate is. On the older birth certificates, I remember mine. When I first got mine, when I first saw the original little card that I got, on the back of the card, it said revenue receipt, treasury use only. And I remember that distinctly. Yep. If you can find one that was printed like pre-1970, you will see that on the back of the card. It'll say revenue receipt, treasury use only. Okay, so for an example, you want to open a restaurant. You go to your grandma. Well, Grandma, I want to open a restaurant. I need $20,000. So she gives you $20,000 and you say, okay, well, we'll pay you back in a year. Everything looks really good. We'll pay you back right away. So you go and you make your restaurant. The year comes up. It's starting to get close. You're not quite doing as well as you thought you were going to. So you go to Grandma and say, look, Grandma, we're not really doing quite as well as just what we're supposed to. But what we'll do, just so that this is fair, anytime you want, bring in as many people as you want. You come to the restaurant. When you get a bill, simply sign the bill. We'll discharge it. This is what we're supposed to be doing with our bills. When we get a power bill, buy a car, anything, you get a true bill, which is signed by the maker, demanding a certain sum of money, dated. There's a certain format for it. You accept that bill for value. It goes back to the Receiver General. The Receiver General balances the books. They discharge that debt against what's already owed to the people, which is the lands and resources that were taken from us. That's how it's supposed to work. And it's a masterful system. It's a beautiful system if it's allowed to operate. But because of greed and usury, it's not being allowed to operate. So your question is, if we use a fiat currency system, will it still work as long as the crap goes away? And the most certainly it will. Because a bill of exchange could be, you know, it could be a $10 bill. It could be a remittance. The remittance on the bottom of your power bill is money. If you look at the Canadian Payments Association Rule H6, remittances, it'll tell you the exact format of the remittance. It doesn't tell you what's required to fill it out to make it into a negotiable instrument. But it tells you that this is money if you fill it out properly. It also, in the rules, if you don't fill it out properly, whoever you give it to can fill it out properly, and then they get paid. That's why they're not telling us how to do this. So they're, you know, all of the utility companies are double dipping because you pay them regular money, and you also send that slip back uncompleted, so they complete it, and then they get paid again.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. That's exactly what, and they say on the bill, please send your payment back with this remittance slip.
That's right. And nobody looks up the word remittance. Remittance is money.
Yeah. So watch this, guys. Here you go. Look. Got to show you something. Here we go. Back of a Canadian birth certificate, pre-1970, revenue receipt for treasury use only. Right there.
Yep. And that number is a tracking number that traces that certificate to a larger certificate, which actually holds the value that they took from you when that certificate was done. It's your straw man account. That's the value of the straw man account. You'll never get it. Trust me. People have been trying for years. I've been involved in this. I know people who have been working at this for 20 years, and you will not get it.
Well, there were certain things that you could test. There were certain things you could get to a level, and pre-2011, there was enough information got out that you could track, you could find your numbers, you could actually get to a certain, and if you had the knowledge, you could, and you knew exactly how to do it, you could take those numbers, that information that you could find online through government stuff, and you could utilize it. And I do know a few people who did manage to get their birth certificates paid out. But when all that information got online, and like I said, it was 2011 when I was able to track mine. Too many people figured it out. Too many people found out where to find the information, and they buried it. And now all the step-by-steps that were released, like 2010, 11, 12, you can try to follow those steps all you want. It gets you nowhere because they've changed everything as to where everything is hidden. So now you can't find it. There are people. There was someone who I knew through Heather, actually, who had managed to do it twice. He had gone to court and he managed twice to get payouts on his birth certificate. And this guy knew his shit inside and out. And that was his thing. And the third time he went in, the third time they pulled him back into, and I guess they called him back into court. They would continuously find excuses to pull him into court. And I think it was on his 20th trip into court over this, they nailed him. And they nailed him on a technicality by throwing a nonsensical question at him that took him by surprise, and he didn't answer the right way. Boom. Into prison he went. Even though 19 times he faced down the courts and won every time, that last one, it was a stupid freaking question they asked him. Something to do with his passport. Like, basically, do you have your passport with you? And he was like, yes. Nailed him instantaneously. Because he then assumed his identity of his straw man, which was on his passport. And that's how they nailed him. Trick question, but they got him. So, can it work? Yeah, because, here's the thing. When we all go talk about, everyone laments the gold standard is always held as this kind of supreme example to hold up in front of everyone. Oh, the gold standard, where we have an actual asset. Well, the whole thing is gold only has the value that it has because everyone has agreed that it has the value that it has. It doesn't actually have any value intrinsically, any more so than silver or palladium or nickel or cobalt or name an alloy. Diamonds, great. They're shiny and sparkly too, just like gold. And at least you can use them to cut steel, right? At least they have an intrinsic value. So even looking at that.
They're also common like rabbit shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody who thinks diamonds are rare is fooling themselves. They're incredibly common.
Yes, incredibly common. So De Boers has De Boers is the largest diamond jewelry company in the world. They have massive amounts of vaults filled to the top with diamonds that they will not release to the public because they have to maintain the image that diamonds are rare. And because of this, they backed themselves into a corner that they now have like tons upon tons upon tons. I mean, I'm not talking like mechanical grade diamonds. I'm talking high quality jewelry grade diamonds that they can't put on the market because they have to maintain the illusion that they're rare and therefore they have a value, right? So all of these things are still based, whether you're talking about a gold coin, a gold ingot, a pound of salt, it's an agreed upon value. And that was the interesting thing that Claire was talking about a couple of weeks ago. It's an agreed upon thing. It's only because we've agreed that we say that this thing has X value, right? Because that's what everyone has agreed it has. Does it actually have that value? Not really. I mean, how else can gold fluctuate from here to here and here to here, or oil fluctuate from here to here to here to here?
Well, that's something a lot of people don't understand is gold doesn't fluctuate. Okay. An ounce of gold today will buy exactly the same as it would 200 years ago. The value of an ounce of gold is identical to what it was back then. The difference is the fiat currency changes. That's what's changing. Also, you mentioned salt. 2,200, 2,300 years ago, salt was a currency.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I used it as an example. It was a hardcore currency. And salt caravans were like the most robbed thing. If you could hit a salt caravan crossing over the desert, you had it, and you had all the gold you needed then. So I want to talk about the value. And I want to get into this because there's a piece here, and I don't have my head wrapped around it yet. I just know that it's nagging at me, and I wanted to throw this out to you guys, okay? What is the value? What is the one thing that we know is the value? It's us.
Energy, labor.
Us, but us in all senses of the word, i.e., we are the fiat currency that they base the fiat currency on, that they make them. We're the ones who create the money, but on that level alone. But then it is our labor. It is our children. It is bringing forth, having children. It is farming the land. It is all of this is value. But it goes deeper than that, right?
I used the example of you're a car manufacturer. You make the coolest car ever. This is the ultimate thing. Nobody wants it. What's it worth? Precisely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Danny, somebody asked a question in the UU group earlier on. I'd have loved to have seen it flesh out a little further, because my comment was our humanity, basically, has got completely and utterly fucked up, to put it bluntly, because of two concepts. One of them, this is just my opinion, agree or disagree, but two concepts. One is the concept of value. We give something, or we give everything a value, and that's been taught to us, that we have to give something and everything a value. because the next concept is exchange. Because it has a value, if I give it to somebody, then that means I need something back of equal or greater value to make the transaction work.
Yep.
If there was no such thing as exchange concepts of and value, mainly the value, then we would be able to live and do whatever we do every single day without having to worry. We just do because it needs doing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the concept of value, look at antiques. Okay. Some guy builds a chair. Okay. He put 7 hours into making this chair. So he's entitled to 7 hours of value. In 15 years, the chair is worth maybe a half hour.
Yeah.
Right? Or less. As soon as you sell it, it's worth half. Like you buy a car, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's half price. Right? In 100 years, if you take really good care of this chair, now it's worth 30 hours. Right? Because it now becomes something rare, something that people seek out. They're sought after, right? This came up in the chat that Karl was talking about everything devalues except real estate, except housing, right? A house, you buy a house, the day you move into it, it's worth more than the day you bought it, which is really weird because everything else, as soon as you buy it, it's not worth what you paid for it. And the general consensus, I mean, there was some dissension with this, but the general consensus was it's because the bankers know everybody needs a house. So in order for you to get that house, they make it so you have to spend more on that house. And it's not an organic inflation. It's a contrived inflation.
Oh, very much so.
That's right. Why they have the real estate boards. They control the valuations.
If you build a house and live in it for 100 years and take really good care of it, it becomes something a little more precious, to a small group of people. There's some people that want the brand new stuff. I personally like the old things. I appreciate the value, the labor, the love that was put into something that was made 100 years ago, because you just can't get that anymore. And, I'm willing to give it a little more value in order to get something like that because I know it's going to be well built. It's going to last. It's going to serve me well. And I'm not going to have to replace it in a year and a half. I mean, so when you're looking at value, you kind of have to split it in both camps because you've got the value of the created item. When I build something, right? I build something like this. You can't really see it because the light's too high, but it's just a little plastic thing, whatever, right? I have some time into this. I have some labor into this. And if somebody wants it, I would like to get something back, but I'm also willing to give it away because I know somewhere down the road, I'm going to get something back that's worth even more. Yeah. It may not be from them. It may be from somebody else, but having, if I give this to a child and that child is going, wow, this is so cool. And they love it and they stare at it and they go, well, this is really neat. They may very well come up with a better way to do it. So I'm going to profit in the end anyway, because I'm going to have access to a better way to do it.
Well, I take a little bit different track on this because I'm, at least with the finances, I'm looking at this from the energetic and the symbol level. And basically, if you take the premise that we are living in a construct, there's two qualities to the construct. One is the framework, the symbols that we see, and if no one's around, the symbol is meaningless. The symbol in and of itself is dead. It doesn't mean anything. The thing that brings this value or our connection with value, let me put it that way, is data, light, consciousness, awareness, flowing through that framework. That's basically the construct. And the things that we've run into is that there are intermediaries that are playing both sides of the camp. And so, if you take John's example of, well, I want as part of the experience that I'm having in an embodiment, in this construct, I want to have this antique here. Well, if someone is a dealer in that antique and they just happen to be into antiques and they find these antiques and they happen to give it to you, that's not a problem. But if you have someone that is saying that I am the only way that you can connect with that thing that you're desiring, that's a problem. And hence, we get into the whole bankers and the Vatican and every single religion and path that's currently in our experience. And to me, the one reason why anyone would come into experience into construct in the first place is to simply have experience, whatever that experience is.
Yep. So
yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah.
No, we're going to go down this rabbit hole a little bit here, because here's the thing. For those of you who have been down this rabbit hole of finance and law and versus legal and control structures, governments and the corporations, etc., then you've already discovered the fact that basically the Vatican is the be-all, end-all when it comes to this shit. And it comes down to the fact of, like, the Vatican owns everything. And literally, it owns everything. And it owns you. But, okay, Carol, this is where I want to go. This is where I want to go with this. It's exactly where I want to go with this.
They think they own me.
Well, that's exactly it. Okay. So we're going to go into the woo-woo here. We're going to go into the energetic kind of shit now. Just for a second. We all have whether you want to call it our higher consciousness, inner consciousness, our eternal consciousness, the part of our energy that it can never die. It is always existing. And people come up with different names. Now, we've watched, and anyone who's done this game, you know how they twist the names and they twist the words so that the original meanings of the words no longer have that common meaning. And they use it in courts, they use it in finance, they use it in contract law, in trusts, etc. And they do it in a way that is very much the control structure. So one of the words I want to discuss is the word soul. The soul. Because for me, I've never resonated with the word soul. Like, and when you get into religious kind of conversations, of course, especially Christianity, obviously, the soul. It's all about saving your soul, right? They're going to come and save you. The evangelists come to your door. The JWs they're going to save your soul, right? So here's the thing. I've talked to a lot of people over the years, a lot of people, that and the kind of where I've come to understand is the fact of what they call, the quintessential they, call a soul is not the intrinsic part of us that is our, I hate using, I'll say spirit. Because, again, we're using fucking lovely programmed words, but it's the only way we can kind of get the conversation going. Whether it's your spirit, your eternal consciousness, however you want to phrase that. So I got into this conversation today, a few hours ago. In the papal bulls and the papal decrees that have claimed ownership of every man, woman, and child on the planet, they own you. It comes down to souls. And the one word, and I'll pull up the document here and I'll read this one section if I can get there. Hold on, guys. Give me a moment. Okay, so the one document we're discussing that is one of the big ones that came out, was put out by Pope Boniface VIII, okay, in 1302. Now, this whole segment of time between the 1200s up until about the 1500s is a really interesting time when you start researching the church and the various treaties that have been signed. But anyways, it was in 1302, Pope Boniface VIII issued the papal bull, the Unum Sanctum, And basically, this is where he claimed Vatican ownership over the entire fucking planet and every soul. Okay? Here's just a couple of big little pieces of it. For with truth as our witness, it belongs to spiritual power to establish the terrestrial power and to pass judgment if it has not been good. The bull ends with, furthermore, we declare and we proclaim. We define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature, and it is actually uses the word creature, to be subject to the Roman pontiff. Now, in one of the dissertations that comes along with this at the exact same time period, one of the bishops wrote, voices the Roman pontiff over the material world. His line of argument states that since the body is governed by the soul, and the soul is governed by the ruler of the spiritual, the Roman pontiff, therefore, is governor of both the soul and the body. Now, that's the basic, where it all comes from, the fact that you are purportedly owned lock, stock, and barrel. But it is the soul that is owned. And only through the tie through the soul to the person, etc. Now, someone just said it in the room, and they just put the most perfect, Philip just said it. The soul is the spirit's straw man. And I think that is pretty fucking accurate. Let's go through this. If the soul is part of the construct, part of the control construct, which is the part that kind of attaches to us and keeps throwing us back through the rinse and repeat cycle, right? Back through, just to be spent again, because we're talking now about the value, and if we are the value, we're literally talking about the souls being spent, right? When we deal with energy, there's always an intermediary, which I love your use of the word, David. You can't shine sunlight directly on your refrigerator and have it power your refrigerator. Now, we know solar energy can power a lot of stuff, but there's an intermediary step. Here's the sunlight that is giving all this amazing energy off, but there is an apparatus in place to harvest that energy, and an apparatus in place that controls the flow or the current of that energy to keep your refrigerator cold, to keep your stove hot, to run your washing machine. You can't just have, right? You can't just have the sun directly powering up that machine. And I suspect that the soul is that intermediary piece, that little piece of a construct, artificial, unnatural, that has been put in place to be that intermediary piece. Like there it is, so that our energy flows into that soul piece. And the soul is directly connected to, the controllers, who are then going to spin that energy and spread its current out to power their systems, i.e. the financial systems. And it's really, really interesting, because the more you look into this, there's a brilliant article, and I will put it out, and I've actually quoted from this a couple of times. It talks about the papal keys. Give me a second. Here it is. And it is called the Legal Ownership of All Souls by the Vatican since 1306, and talks about the 3 papal keys and the 3 trusts. It's really, really interesting. Okay, but here's the thing. It still all comes down to them controlling the soul. Mm-hmm. Not you, not you, not you, and not you, but the soul. So if that is the piece, and I'm going to go back to this whole thing. If the straw is your spirit's, if the soul is your spirit's straw man, the fake piece that they can control and trade off of, right? Then we truly are the value. We truly are the value behind the system. And intrinsically, on all levels, financially, power-wise, etc. This is a piece that is really, really interesting to me, because if the soul is part of an external control, an external construct, how do we turn off? How do we cut the cord? How do we resign from that position?
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go, David. I want to hear this.
Yeah. Okay. My suggestion, I take the posture that you cannot, under any circumstance, separate yourself out from the experience that you're having.
Okay.
And so what that does is that puts you putting skin in the game, and that puts you in being involved in your own experience. And so that means that you have to say yes to everything in your world and about you. And if you do that, that allows you to open up space to create out of where you are, out of this endless loop. And so I did that piece about, the Holy See and all like that, because it's a really easy to label, this one word overlay called the Vatican. Well, it's not. There's three intrinsic, possibly four intrinsic pieces to that. You have the Holy See, which is a legal entity.
Very much so.
Right.
Oh, very much so. A corporate legal entity.
Exactly. And it has diplomatic relations with, I believe, 180 different countries, several different international big organizations. I think the ISO is on their diplomatic arrangement. That piece I haven't been able to verify. Okay. And so basically it's kind of one of two things, but they're combined. One, it's a legal fiction. It doesn't exist. It's not real. On the other hand, if I feel on the other side of that, that Leviathan thing that we've been talking about, it's using that legal fiction as its interface to connect with what's below that. And what's below that is two things. One, you have, I forget the term, but it's the popple something or other. These people they're representatives of the Holy See.
Yeah.
They do not have diplomatic relations. They just represent the entity that does have diplomatic relations. That's the Pope, and he works through the Roman Curia, and there's several departments of the Roman Curia. And then I also looked into the Institute for Religious Works, which is basically the Vatican Bank.
Yeah.
The Vatican Bank was created by the representatives of the Holy See. It is a separate entity from the Holy See, and it's also a separate entity from the Roman Curia and the whole papal thing. But it services those two entities.
Yeah.
There's another entity on top of that, and that's the Vatican City-State, which is nothing more than a country just like any other country where the representatives of the Holy See happen to be doing business. They have their offices there. It has a country code. It has a mailing code. If you wanted to go and talk to one of the representatives of this fiction, you'd have a place to go and do that, and a meeting room or sit down for coffee or whatever with them. So if you start approaching things in that way, you start unpacking this, and you can start doing your energetic work in places where it's really going to take effect. Like we've been doing, not just in this group, the RTS group, but also in Lisa's group and in other groups. If you start doing your energetics focused on the Holy See, and not to attack it, but just to go kind of like, unpack it and to start to pull off these tendrils that it has attached, it can't reattach those tendrils because you see it for what it is. And if it cannot respond back, I also see you. You've just taken a huge amount of power away from that. And the caveat on all that is that you have to do all of that with love and clarity.
Yeah, I'm still going to kick him in the balls. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
Just my way of doing things. Okay,
well, you can do that with love.
yeah, not so much. Not so much. Okay, so interesting. So Claire just popped in and she just said, if they can only copy, there must be an authentic intermediary. So
yes.
That is an interesting concept, okay? Because we're talking about we as beings are authentic. And then we have a straw man. And then if our spirit, our inner self, our eternal self, if you will, our eternal consciousness, whatever you want to call it, has its straw man, which is the soul. And we have these corporations mimicking intermediaries like the Vatican. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that there is an authentic intermediary?
I have a suggestion on that.
Okay.
All right. So remember when we were kind of unpacking the whole construct thing back in like November and October and all like that. Well, it's kind of the same thing, but it's your perspective and how you play with this. Like with time. Time is this little tiny thing, at least in my opinion, that helped serve the experience that someone was having.
Yeah.
If that's turned, and that's a good thing. That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay. And if you have someone that has an expertise in time, you can go and fix whatever you need to fix with time. But if you have someone that has an expertise and they have fun with it, well, why not talk with them and everyone's happy. Everyone's having the experience that they want. But if you flip that around where the experience that you're having serves time, then you have to go to someone that is right in between you and getting something fixed. Mm. And so you have to rely on that intermediary because the intermediary is saying, well, I can see the light, but you have to go through me to connect with the light.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, and is that not, I mean, that's exactly what this papal bull from 1303 was about. You must, the Vatican, the Pope, is your intermediary of your soul to your creator. You must, you have to pray this way. We are the controllers. We are, that's exactly what they've done. They've set themselves up as this intermediary. Mm-hmm. But it's, again, it's all part of the artificial, not the, I hate using the word organic, but not the intrinsic as ourselves.
Right. So
it's part of the control structure.
Would it not be, I say, prudent to explore the idea that there doesn't even need to be an authentic intermediary? That we are the authentic intermediary and that role has been taken from us and given to a fiction?
Okay, well, look at it this way. The Pope's just a man. Mm-hmm. The Pope is just a man. And if he's acting as the intermediary, it's just a man talking to a man. He's just a man. He's in a position with a fancy, disgusting-looking hat and ridiculous dress. But he's still just a human man. Mm-hmm. Although that's questionable sometimes, too. But he's a man. So, that's actually interesting then, John, because then exactly that. You could even say the fact of, are we, this physical piece, the intermediary between our eternal spirit selves? Is it us, the physicality? Is that the only intermediary there is? And the Pope, the pontiff, is the artificial intermediary that's just trying to step into that place and take on that role?
Exactly. In my opinion, exactly.
Interesting.
For me, I don't like using the word intermediary because of what it infers.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a word that works better, but in your description, absolutely. But that intermediary piece, serves the experience that you're having. It's not getting in the way of that.
But I disagree. This is what, no, let me not say, I'm not going to say I disagree.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's open to question because we don't know what this experience is about. We think we have a handle on it. We think we know. We feel that it could be this way. But the very basic fact is no one knows what this is.
Right.
Did we program it this way? Did we plan for this entire thing? So this entire waking process and the whole bit was planned out. Everything is played out exactly as it was planned for the experience. Was it a takeover? Where, like where we went in here to have an experience and then it was taken over by all these intermediaries. And so for me, I don't like to put an absolute on it to say that this experience is all part of, or what we're experiencing is all part of it, because we don't know.
Right. Well, if we look at it from a very simple perspective, the energetic being said, "Well, I wonder what it's like to be physical." No other agenda. Just I want to feel the grass on my toes. All the rest of it is just bullshit, right? We're just looking at it very, very simply. So from that perspective, yes, then this physicality here would be the tool, the facilitator for that experience, so that the purely energetic could experience physical. I mean, all the rest of the stuff, the control system, the takeover, all of that, that's an interesting thought experiment. Yep. But when you're looking at this from the very base point, an energetic being doesn't know what physical is, doesn't know what a sunset looks like, doesn't know what the smell of a flower is. So to simply experience physical, he would require this cool little remote control car.
Yeah.
Right.
Which we could look as well that the physical existed as a separate entity to what we as energy exist in, ourselves. Are we existing as energy within an already existing physical universe, but we couldn't experience physical because we were energy? So we made that interface. Or are we in an environment or a dimension where everything is energy and there is no physical? In which case, somebody would have to come up with a concept of physical for us to then go in and then experience it.
Well,
electricity doesn't do anything all by itself, other than warm things up. It's not going to turn a motor. It's not going to light a light bulb. You have to have that intermediary. You have to have that bridge to the physical in order for that energetic to happen. This is what one of the issues we're having with the plasma energy is that conversion process, because people want the plasma energy to work with their electrical devices. So we have to come up with some way to convert this absolutely fundamental core energy of the universe into something very specific that we can use in our devices. If we use the plasma energy directly, like with the health devices, there's no conversion. The body, which is already the converter, will just do it, and it works really, really good. But the energy systems, when we're working with electricity or for motive force or for flight, really complicated. It's really hard to make that work. So even presupposing that the physical never existed in the first place, and somebody went, gee, I wonder what it's like to do that, and then develop this thing, and a bunch of other energy beings were looking over his shoulder going, oh, that's cool, I'd like to do that too. And everybody got together and they made this construct to experience physicality. Yeah, I can totally see it. And it's simple. It's very, very simple. All of the biggest thinkers in the world, everybody, all the philosophers, all of the geniuses, everybody who is a thinker is going to tell you that if it's not simple, it's wrong.
It's wrong. Right. Exactly. Okay.
So I'm stepping back. I'm trying to look at the simplest core expression of this. And then if I need to add complexity from that point, I will.
Okay, and so I wanted to throw one little thing in here. Claire just brought up another little piece that's going back to the intermediary thing. It said, what if it's kind of inverse? And we talk about this all the time. It's like, if they say it's good, then it's got to be fucking bad, right? And if they say it's this, then if it's black, then it's going to be white, right? She said, if everything is inverse, maybe we are the intermediary. They need to access our soul energy, or we are the intermediary that they're using through a soul to access our full energy.
Well, that looks at the control system. Why did they get you to think a certain way? Why did they get you to give up your energy?
To give consent. To consent to this. Exactly.
The way that I frame this for myself is that when you come into construct to have experience, you basically want it to work, for the experience that you're having. Well, no one knows if we did this to ourselves or if there were an invasion or whatever. Well, what if this innocuous event, whatever it is simply moving us from a state of experience where things are really fucked up like they are here to one where everything works the way it's supposed to. And then it plays out, and then however the narrative that someone has and however that's going to play out is going to play out for that person in that way. Whether they end up in paradise with unicorns and fairies or whether they're in the same world, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have a financial system that works the way it's supposed to for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from the simplistic perspective of energetic beings wanting to experience physical, there's going to be an infinite number of those. There's an infinite number of possibilities of branches of the physical you could do. It's reasonable to assume that at least one of those entities is going to go, I wonder what it's like to drown.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Right? I wonder what it's like to starve to death. So... yeah, there is some logic in thinking that, sure, we created this, but I think it did get out of hand. And the takeover may not be the takeover that we're thinking it is. It's just, it was kind of nudged a little bit. And this poor, dumbed down, energetic being that's running this remote control car, somebody said, well, you can't quite do it that way. You got to do it this way. And over generation after generation after generation, we started to believe that. And that's what created the crap that we're dealing with now. But
I think another way as well is greed of the physical.
Yeah, well, again, that's
and now we're in a situation where we're existing in the physical. Now it's a greed. We must acquire as much physical as we can. Well, even experience as much physical as we can.
Even the greedy people, the controllers, if they understood they are entirely energy and they're here for an experience, they could just go, well, I want to be greedy and I'm going to have everything, and they would have everything. They wouldn't have to go and deceive and cheat and lie and steal and all of that sort of stuff, unless that's the experience they wanted to have.
Don't forget they're interacting with others as well within this quantum reality, and free will
and there are
is
rules.
a factor in that.
There are rules,
yes,
and they have to follow certain rules. The problem is that we don't know what the rules are for the most part.
Yeah.
So therefore, I mean, that's when going back to what you and John have been discussing on the show, and figuring out what are their rules. Because if you can figure out what their rules are, then you can start playing their game by their rules to your benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes along with the energetic as well. If we can get even just the slightest inkling of the point behind the energetic coming to the physical, then we can start stepping into that role in a meaningful way. Right now, it's all speculation. We've got a few people trying it. They're having a few little limited successes here and there, but most people can't meditate. They just fall asleep. most people can't manifest. I know, Danny, you had one rather profound manifestation happen in Morocco with the water.
Yeah.
You know, well was empty, and they went, fuck that. Well is not empty. Next day it's full, and everybody else's well is empty. We have little tidbits of limited success within this when we start pushing the boundaries. And that's kind of telling me that the boundaries are only guidelines. They're not hard and fast. The rules are, well, you know, do it this way as long as you know, agree to do it this way, but you don't really have to. And we got to get that through our head, through generation after generation after generation, after thousands of years of being told, you're small little thing, you die, and that's it, game over.
Yep.
That's something we got to get over.
Something else going on at the moment as well that's being discussed in the fact that we're going through a forced ascension. I hate that word, but that's one that's accepted. That something is happening now across the board, that we are being forced into a new reality and a new understanding of what we are and where we're supposed to be. And I think that we have to look at that too. You know, is this something that's been something we agreed on, as you suggested there, Danny, or is it something else?
Well, we're now asking the questions that 500 years ago nobody would even come up with.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unless you were up on top of a mountain or went through that kind of training to ask those kind of questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, okay, so it's really, really interesting. So Sonny just said, as creators, there are no limits, positive or negative. But this is where it comes into the whole thing of belief and programming, right? And it's been the joke since like fucking early 2013, me and my joke about manifesting a tomato. But if you don't believe that you can manifest a physical tomato to drop into just appear in your hand, then no matter how much you concentrate on manifesting a tomato, it's not going to happen. Now, like I said, we talk about manifestation. I joked a couple of weeks ago about me manifesting a pumice stone to smooth down my rough, calloused feet, and joking about it, saying I fucking gotta get need a pedicure. Fuck, my feet are just a disaster. It's summertime, running around bare feet, and going, I don't even have anything to even file or scrub my feet with. And going to the beach 20 minutes later, and my son going, Mommy, look, I found a floating rock. And he picks up a pumice stone, and it is perfectly hand-shaped, like to sit perfectly in your hand. Like you could not have designed a better something to hold on to scrub your feet with. It's perfect. I've never seen another pumice stone ever on that beach. Ever. And it just so happens that my son finds one floating in the water next to him, literally not 30 minutes after I'd been joking about the fact of needing a pumice stone to deal with my heels. Now, it's a little thing. It's a little piece. But it gives you the first little inkling that makes you go, okay, there's no fucking way that was just coincidence. I'm sorry. I manifested that to happen. Okay. And it's one little, and you go, oh, I did that. Okay, so let's do it again. What can we manifest today? And it's almost like a building process, right? Like you start with the little things. And God knows in the Unfuckers room, it's gotten hysterical. The conversations about manifesting and the things that people have manifested and they're almost always really small. No one's manifested $1 million. Why is that? Because they've been programmed to believe that they can't possibly do it. So we start small and simple, and we start building and all that. It's kind of like building your confidence. As you're a kid, you want to ride a bike. You start off with like training wheels, or you start off with a tricycle that's only this high off the ground. And then, you get to a little bit of a bigger tricycle. And then you get to your first two-wheel bike, but it's got 2 training wheels on it. And you got the crash helmet and the elbow pads and the knee pads and the whole bit. As we get more confident, we can start removing some of the control structures, start removing the training wheels, start removing certain pieces of the overprotective parenting protective gear, and start moving into it. And that's why I said, like on the call, I think was it Wednesday on the Unfuck It discussion, where I said I want everyone to start, like, pick something small. Just pick something small, like something easy, if you will, and just work on manifesting it. Whether you're going to manifest some tomatoes so you can make a bolognese, and the next door neighbor just happens to have a bumper crop of tomatoes come in and they can't use them all, and they give you a basket of tomatoes, which I've done multiple times now. Just something small. Start with something small, and let's start practicing a little better.
Yeah, the concept of the belief behind it, we've already got examples for hundreds of years, and that's hypnosis. Yeah. People who do not know how to play a violin,
yep.
they couldn't pick one up and hold it correctly, and if their life depended on it, get hypnotized, you're now a virtuoso, and they pick up a violin and they play beautifully. One really big one, which I use as an example of how fluid reality is, was the hypnosis hypnotized this guy that his daughter was at home, and she wasn't at the theater at the time, and his daughter is standing in front of him. He takes a pocket watch, opens it up, puts it against the daughter's back, and says, "What time's on my watch?" And the guy reads the time on his watch and reads the inscription on the inside of the watch case through his daughter. And this has been repeated numerous times, over and over and over again, and it's not bullshit. You can repeat it. So yes, is there the opportunity that we could, through an external mechanism, remove those barriers that you're talking of, those little niggling doubts? Because it's going to be the little niggling ones. It's not the big doubts that are going to get in your way. It's the little ones that you're not paying attention to that are going to cause the problems. Yeah. Can we, through an external mechanism, remove those niggling doubts and gain access to this once again? Yes.
The way that I've been playing with this is to redefine something like the word belief. Belief, if you break it down, basically it means I don't know. If you access belief in that way, it turns into this magnificent tool of navigation, discovery, and adventure. However, the way that it's used and the way that it's handed to the vast majority of people is that at the core of it, you don't know, but all of a sudden they've wrapped it around with this diabetic level of frosting, and that frosting is that you know something absolutely is true, when on the inside it's like you don't have a clue. It's the same thing for trust and truth and honesty and all of those words. They're great if you use them in that discovery, or I don't know, or that on it, or that clear connection that, I don't know, but I'm going to go and find this thing out. It works great for that. But this other thing, screw that.
Yeah, the concept of belief presupposes that you could be wrong.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
it's that simple.
It's a trap. The entire word is a trap, and it is a program. It is 100%. Everything that ever falls into the whole category of belief, to me, is intrinsically part of a program that is a control structure, because it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it gets back to, and one of the things that works for me is you know what you know what you don't know, and nobody knows what they don't know.
Yeah.
That seems to be a very good foundation and a very good, simple, accessible description, and point of attention. And from there, it's like you can add anything you want to on that.
Yeah, I agree. Guys, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I hugely, hugely fucking enjoyed this. And we're done 2 hours, believe it or not. I'm not even sure how we managed to do that. It's like, what
that was
fuck?
Time. What's that?
Time is fucking irrelevant. This was really awesome. And I think we're going to have to go back and kind of, because we've really only scratched the surface on a lot of this stuff. There's so many more pieces to this. And for me, and like I said, everyone views things differently. Everyone has their own unique way of bringing in information and of sorting through it, etc. For me, I'm someone who I like to know the how we got here. Mm-hmm. Because that helps me backtrack to figure out how to get the fuck out of here. Right? I am a fact digger. I am down the rabbit holes because I'm always wanting to learn what was the process. What are the pieces that have been put in front of me? Therefore, I can kind of figure out my way to work through them, regardless of how that works out. Right? I find these conversations when we bring people together like this really, really intrinsically interesting because of the different ways people look at information. And there's so many avenues that we can look at. So I'm really hoping we can revisit this topic again sometime soon. I think most of the audience out there would be well agreement with that. Yes, please. Yes, please. Oh, yes. So that's it,
It's
folks.
good to be interesting.
It's good to be interested. And interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. They can be interested and we're interesting.
Oh, we're interesting. Go away. Mosquitoes, fuck off. That's it. That's it for us for tonight. I don't know. Maybe we can call it for the Unfuck It discussion this Wednesday. Maybe we can kind of throw this open on Wednesday. And people, you guys can think about all like questions, conversations, throw us your views, and let's have like maybe further discussion on Wednesday when we can kind of get everyone in here and really, really spread it out and see what kind of things we can pull out here, because I know there's a lot more pieces to this that would be really, really cool to get into. Okay, that's it. That's it, darlings. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Danny.
And
thank you for bringing us all together on this.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Danny.
It was a lot of fun.
It's good to be chatting with everybody.
Yeah, you're most welcome, babe.
Awesome. So, guys, guess what? Next Sunday, same back time, same back channel, Transpicuous Views. Who knows what we'll talk about then? It is what it is. And that's it for us. We'll talk to you on Wednesday for the Unfuck It discussion. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.